Hello. Okay.
Okay. No.
Nothing. Huh. Um,
Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for our discussion on job hunting tips for foreign trained attorneys. I'm Amy Goldstein, Chair of the Training Programs for the Legal Mentor Network, and I own Grayson Allen, a recruiting and career coaching firm for attorneys. For those of you who might not be familiar, the Legal Mentor Network is a nonprofit organization focused on providing mentoring to law students and junior attorneys. You can find more information about the organization and how to join on our website, legalmentornetwork.org. So this program came about because our mentors, me included, are approached all the time with questions specifically about how to overcome the challenges that are faced by foreign attorneys and LLM students. We wanted you to know that you're not alone, and we hope that hearing helpful pointers from today's panelists who have been in your shoes and found ways to succeed will help lead you on your own path to success. Feel free to enter questions in the Q&A as we go along. We have a lot of material to cover, so bear with us while we go through the program that is planned, but we will be leaving time for your questions, but go ahead and enter them when you're thinking of them. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator, Darren Braham, and he will lead the introductions. Darren, thanks so much.
Oh, hey, thanks so much, Amy. Really appreciate it. Hey, folks, my name is Darren Braham. I'm a Senior Associate General Counsel at a consulting firm called Simon Kucher & Partners. It's a global firm with offices all around the world. I'm excited to talk about a topic near and dear to my heart, my own background, and I'm sure our panelists feel the same as well. So looking forward to sharing some of our insights. Just to get a real sense of our Zoom room, and I know we have around 150 people registered. Not everyone's joined just yet, but we'll throw a poll into the chat, or however we do it functionality wise, to just get a sense of who people are here joining us today. So if you're a student, if you're a practicing attorney, maybe you're both actually. I know a lot of LM students have backgrounds outside of their home country. So please take a second to complete that. I've been involved with the Legal Mentor Network for about 8 months or so here in Boston, where I'm based. I helped, along with a couple of colleagues, not here today, set up a kind of networking chapter for students and junior lawyers, for mentoring. So this is a great organization. I really encourage everyone to get involved. We are a pastoral profession, right? We need to kind of nurture and care and really raise our profession. That's I think kind of part and parcel of being a lawyer. And mentoring, while it can be informal or formal, it's great to have this kind of organization to help drive mentoring for those that might not be able to access it. So as I mentioned, I'm from the UK originally, and I've been in Boston for about 18 years. I practiced law in the UK for a number of years before moving here. And then when I came here, kind of hit a brick wall in terms of trying to become admitted here. At the time, it was a very different climate to how things are today, and I appreciate that there's still certain hurdles and challenges to face, but back then there was very, very little at all. And there were only a couple of law schools, in fact, that actually offered LLMs, Suffolk and BU, from recollection. And when I applied to the Board of Bar Examiners, which is the agency that admits lawyers here in Massachusetts, I was told to go get a JD, even though I had very similar backgrounds to other candidates or lawyers here in Massachusetts with similar backgrounds to myself. And there was really kind of this arbitrary discretion applied across the board. So it took this gentleman who became kind of a rock star in the LLM arena called Gregory Asakwe to change everything. And he was this Nigerian educated admitted lawyer who had practiced in Nigeria, had practiced in Trinidad and Tobago, worked in Connecticut, was admitted in New York, and his wife got a job in Boston, and he wanted to relocate here. He'd only been admitted in New York for a couple of years, so wasn't able to waive in, but asked for an exception to the rules. And the BBE refused him and asked him to get a JD, and he sued and took the case to the SJC, which is the highest court here in Massachusetts. And consequently, he won, and the rules were completely changed as a result, and it was much more prescribed and much more fair and less kind of discretionary and arbitrary. So that was around the time that I had come to the US, and I sent in my reconsideration application, and I got a response back within about 24 hours saying, hey, you can do 3 or 4 courses. I can't remember exactly, it was so long ago. But like it was UCC, constitutional law, intro to American law, and you can sit for the bar exam. So long time ago, everything kind of changed. I ended up getting an LLM, and we'll talk about that because it made sense at the time. But you know, it was a long process. It was a long, drawn out process, and during which I reconsidered, you know, if I had to get a JD, do I want to practice law here in the US? So that's me in a nutshell. We have 2 fantastic panelists to help this conversation, this dialogue, and I'll let them introduce themselves. We have Gildy and Eduardo. Gildy is a senior legal counsel at SAP, and Eduardo is he's passed the bar exam, but is titled law clerk at Wilkie Farr, a very prestigious law firm here in the US. So let me hand it over to you for introductions, Gildy.
Hi, everyone. First, I want to say, like, I really appreciate this opportunity for us to like gear our community back of the LLM students, because I was an LLM myself. Thank you for like Legal Mentor Group for doing this for the current LLM students and kind of like invited us to talk today. I really appreciate the opportunity for that instance. So I was originally from Turkey, and I was a practicing attorney back in home for about like 5 years before I started my journey in the United States. And I came to do my LLM at UCLA. It was in the corporate and business law arena at UCLA. And after that, I did my OPT. Since I don't have the US citizenship, I had to go through the hustles of the visa situation in the United States, which I know you're all like suffering from, probably like most of you. And then I got my OPT. During my OPT, I worked in a law firm in Los Angeles for about like 4 years. And then I did like a career shift, comes with the COVID, and I wanted to jump into a ClickUp and as a startup arena to do like more technology related stuff. And after working for ClickUp, which is a cloud-based software company for about 1.5 years, then I made the change to SAP. So now I'm a senior legal counsel at SAP. If you guys don't know what SAP is, it's like the 3rd biggest software company in the world with IBM and Oracle. And what I'm practicing daily is technology transaction, software license agreements, and mostly also like the growing area of privacy and cybersecurity law.
Terrific. Thanks, Gildy. Eduardo, welcome.
Hey, Darren. Thank you, Gildy. And yes, thanks to the Legal Mentor Network and Amy for making this possible. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with others about our experiences. Although I didn't have, the burden that probably Gildy had of not being, a U.S. citizen at some point in time. I am a U.S. citizen, but I was foreign trained. So I did law school in Colombia at Universidad de los Andes, and then started paving my way in the legal career in Colombia. I then came to the US and did a master's of law at FIU. I couldn't make it into big law. Then I did a tax law master's at Northwestern and couldn't make it into big law. So then I decided to pursue the JD program at Emory, where I finally made it to big law. And I found, an angel in my career, which was Maria Leticia Osa, who is a partner at Wilkie Farr & Gallagher, where I currently work for the last year or so. You're not alone. I can tell you that. I've lived, the burden of having to apply to many law firms and to, understand how to continue my legal career in the US. But we're here to help.
Terrific. Thanks, Eduardo. Yeah, I mean, both you have such rich experience, and we can all draw on kind of the things that you've learned and you know, considerations for the unwary for sure. And we want to make this webinar obviously useful for our attendees. So, you know, I was thinking about this in kind of really two questions. What have been the hurdles that you found, you know, to working in the US? And then really two, what can you do to increase your chances? You know, for those, we have a good mix of students and practicing attorneys. I suspect a number of you are probably both. I saw that already in the chat, you know, for a third option. So, you know, for those of you that want to practice here, you know, what can you really do to help increase your chances? So we take the first question, because I'm sure, you know, a lot of our attendees have kind of dealt with many of these issues across the board, but you know, Gildy, what are some of the kind of hurdles that you found, you know, from moving from Turkey to the US?
Okay. For me, actually, it could be like different for like many LLM students, because when I came to US to do my master's at UCLA, it was actually just a year like education experience thing for me. I never intended to stay this long. So because of that reason, because I was already working as an in-house corporate counsel back in home, I had a good job, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this master's degree, get the international exposure, and come back home where I was before. But after doing my 9-10 months like with UCLA, I was exposed to like these attorneys from all around the world, and I'm like, okay, maybe like it could be a good thing to try and like see, to get some international exposure of like actually practicing law versus just the education side. So after UCLA, as all LLM students know, there's an option called like OPT, which is like optional training. I looked for any openings basically that can lead me some sort of international like experience in the United States, which is not easy. I know it's like they only give you like 3 months and you're all alone basically applying and getting rejections, and not even like even getting responses from many law firms or like companies. So that was the hustle. I think the first hustle that you face, especially if you don't have any citizenship or like a legal right to stay United States, you basically have to go back home or you find something for your OPT. So that's the first, I think, hard thing that hits you after graduation, even if you, you know, graduate like top 5, like top whatever of your class, it's still harder because you don't have any. And in that case, I was a foreign attorney. I was already a practicing attorney. Even in my case, it wasn't easy because for the US, it doesn't make anything easier. You don't have a law degree. You're not an attorney here. You just have a master's degree, fine, from a United States university. So that was the first thing I think that we all like overcome. And then I was lucky to find, I mean, of course, I can't say I was lucky, but I mean, I found this job like a week before my flight back home in LA in a law firm. So for me, it was a good opportunity. And then I started working there. And then it comes after the fact that, okay, I'm going to stay here for another year. Like, why not taking the bar? Which is again the most extraordinary thing I think I have done, because I think I told you before, I didn't take any bar classes when I was going to UCLA, again, because my intention was to go back, and I took only the international subjects that could be useful if I go back to Europe. So that was even more challenging, I guess, for me versus the students with the mindset of I'm going to stay, I'm going to prep for the bar, because they took all the, you know, constitution, criminal law, all the big stuffs that they were tested at the bar. So for me, that wasn't the case. But again, the second, I think, hustle that I need to overcome is just to pass the bar with not taking any bar related classes, which I did unexpectedly. And I passed the bar on my first try. And that I would say, like, I mean, back to your question, I think the main hustles coming and starting practicing here, first is like if you are one of them, the visa stuff, because it's not easy to like maneuver around. It is really tough. We can go into details if you want, if there's any questions. I don't want to take more time with that topic, but that is the main hustle. And then when it comes to practicing law, it is the law firm I did practice law for OPT, they're doing like aviation and maritime law, which I have no experience before. So it's like constant learning. It was good because it was exposed to US law in a sense, but also regulated heavily with the international conventions. So that kind of, I think, gave me a leverage finding the job and also like practicing the job with that capacity. But in terms of practicing arenas, I would recommend them, especially students, to have this variety versus like, oh no, I want to do this and stick with this law arena. I would recommend being more flexible, especially in the beginning, to kind of figure out the visa stuff and then kind of like maneuver around at the end what you really want to do in terms of practicing, like in terms of subject of the law that you want to practice in United States. That could be probably the second, I think, big thing than adjusting.
It's a good point actually, and kind of makes me think about, you know, when I was choosing what type of LLM to do. You know, like I said, there weren't many options available back then, and I think law schools have figured out that LLMs to some extent are pretty good revenue generators for them.
Exactly.
In down markets, it's an opportunity to kind of plug in a resume gap maybe if you can't find a job. But it's also a good way to get some extra level of expertise, right? So if it is a tax LLM, if it's IP related, whatever it might be, there is an opportunity to kind of drill down and get a bit more technical information and learning. So we shouldn't kind of dismiss them out of hand, you know, and sometimes they are just a means to an end as well. You know, by month 14 of my LLM, I was just so tired. I was working at the time and I was just so exhausted. I just wanted to kind of get it done, which you know, on reflection, I probably could have put more effort into it. But you know, Eduardo, from your perspective, and we'll talk more about visas as well, because I think that's a really important area to kind of discuss. So we'll come back to that as well. But Eduardo, from your perspective, what are some of the hurdles that you've encountered?
So look, the first hurdle there is just how to stand out. You know, it's very difficult to stand out when, you know, when we don't know how to portray our experience as potentially, you know, lawyers in our countries working for 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years and coming to the US for LLM. So, you know, it's difficult to do that. And it's also difficult because many of the career services at the universities that have LLMs do not understand, you know, how to portray these characteristics, qualities, and capacities of the LLMs. So I think that was the most difficult thing is standing out and having a good resume that I could feel proud of, but that would also, you know, call the attention of potentially recruiters. So that's the first thing. And the second is, you know, once you get to the US, usually I didn't know how to, you know, draft a cover letter or who to look for, who to write and how. So then I had to go to events. I had to go to, you know, networking places. I had to, you know, cold call. It was not easy, and it was not easy to getting rejected, maybe 100 or 200 times. So you need to be flexible. You need to, you know, continue working. This is not a big marathon. This is just, you know, this is just a run, and we have to, you know, continue. The third thing is, you know, when I was offered a position at Wilkie, I maybe thought I was going to be a second or third year. And I came as a first year, you know, after having 10 years of experience. And then, you know, at some point in time, I felt it was going to be, you know, very tough. But on the contrary, this has helped me, you know, foster relationships with partners that I wouldn't be otherwise have been able to have, you know, because everyone would think that I was already known in a subject. The second thing is I have had the ability to gain a little bit of leverage and then differentiate myself from others in some of the aspects or some of the things that I already know how to do. And the third is, it's a big learning experience, experiencing how document saving works, how the standards for writing work. All of this is very important that we have. And this is why you guys have to be flexible. You have to be flexible. This is a career that you're starting here, and it's not the continuation of your career overseas or in the countries where you practiced before. And the last hurdle is, getting to the bar exam. That's a very difficult exam. You need to prepare for it. And I think that, if you do that, if you pass the bar, you'll differentiate yourself much further.
Yeah, 100% agree on all those points. And there's obviously a lot to unpack there. So so for the bar exam, every state obviously is different. I know we have this kind of common exam now across the world. It's been so long, I don't even know what it's called. I forget what it's called, but it's across the multiple states. But it really is something that you need to take seriously, and it's not intuitive. Right, standardized testing might not be intuitive from your home country, and it's not something that you kind of do with regularity throughout education. So something to be mindful of, and definitely take it seriously. Definitely take a prep class. Barbary or other options are available, but they are really geared to getting you over the line if you kind of follow it to the letter. So highly encourage that. The July exam seems to have a higher pass rate than the February exam. I guess that's for retakers. It seems to be there's a sliding scale in terms of who passes the more times you take it. But certainly encourage people to kind of take that seriously. And then obviously look, depending on where you want to reside and actually work and practice law, you've got to kind of think about that in advance as well. So you might be doing an LLM in California, but ultimately end up in Massachusetts. So just be mindful of that as you kind of work through that. In terms of visas, let's just kind of circle back to that maybe. I know, Eduardo, you have the American citizenship, so that wasn't an issue as such. But maybe we can kind of draw on cultural sensitivities as well to some extent. But Gildy, kind of what were some of the hurdles that you've run into? And in true lawyer fashion, this is not legal advice as to visa options here. But at the same time, there are some options available. But H-1B is probably the most familiar to everyone on this call. But Gildy, what things have you run into in terms of visas?
Yeah, for the visas, like you come to school and you had to use the F1, which is like the student visa. Then you first get accepted to the LLM. That's what you have, which comes with a lot of restrictions. Of course, there's you can't work. It's only study. I think it only allows to work in a campus, limited amount of time if you want to make money and study, which is also important, I think, for LLM students. And then after F1, again, it's the one that I mentioned previously, the OPT, which call optional training, that they give you right after F1. If you're able to find a job, it depends on, I think for the most of the LLMs, it's for 1 year. So if you get a job in the United States, you don't have any other visa except the OPT to work and stay in the United States. So which is also a year. So after that year, it has to be changed. If it's going to be an employer sponsorship, the way I did, is the H-1B. I think they kind of I heard they recently changed it last year. Before, the H-1B applications has to be done by the first day of April, and everything has to be in that file, all the necessary documents. It's a lot of things that they had to prepare. But now I think first they do the lottery. So H-1B is a lottery as well. It's not guaranteed, even if Facebook, Google, whoever sponsors you, you have to go through that electronic lottery. And if you're picked out of that lottery, then they go into your file and see if they approve or reject. So I think the chances is 20% or 15 to 20% more with H-1B if you have a master's LLM degree or doctorate degree in United States. You go like into a different pool of candidates for H-1B. So I think it's a plus for LLMs. Raise their chances slightly a little bit more, but it's not guaranteed still. So if you get this lottery and then they look into your file and then they approve or reject. If they approve, then you have the H-1B for like 6-year period. It's like complete. Yeah, it's from start to finish. It has to be like 6 years total. And I think first they gave you like for 3 years, and it can be an extension of another 3 years by your employer, of course. But it's limited to, it's like 6 years. So during that 6 years, you can work, you can stay, you can travel outside and inside the United States, but you're not a permanent resident. You are still under a work visa that comes with restrictions, many restrictions. But also during that 6-year period, the most common way to go is to apply for the green card for your employer applies for you. And it's a 1.5 to 2 year process, again, from start to finish. And I think it costs around $20,000 for each employer. So that's kind of an investment actually they're making for you. And you can pay for the fees. It's all employer has to pay. And then I think for the last period, like last 6 months to years period, depends on your nationality. So the green card process can complete from 2 years up to, like, I have some Indian friends that they're still in the process for like 6 years. So the last part, it's not employer based. It's basically like where your nationality is. But it's a lengthy and costly period of time. But after that, then when you get your green card, then you're kind of free. You're kind of free in sense of you can work for like anyone. Because before that, with the H-1B, you can't work legally for anyone else but the sponsor who sponsored you for the H-1B. So that's an important thing too, I think, because most lawyers, if you want to like work for someone, you're kind of limited in a sense to do even like I think some pro bono. It's limited with H-1Bs, and also like if you want to do anything side, like help with a friend or like any legal advice to give is forbidden. You can only legally work for your sponsor during the H-1B. That's the path that I did, but I know of course there are other paths to get the visa situation resolved in the United States. There's like a green card lottery. I think they're still doing it every year. But I think it's like less than 1% to get this lottery. And of course, there's like a marriage path. You can get married and get the citizenship and the green cards. There's an investment visa for the ones I think who wants to start their own business after LLM. They can start their own law firm and apply for, I think it's E1, the investor visa. But the hustle with that is like it never turns into a green card. It never turns into a permanent residency. So you need to be mindful of that. It's like for 5 years. And then after every 5 years, you need to like renew your business plan and reapply and renew your visa kind of thing. I think for the ones who wants to live and get the residence and like citizenship at the end, H-1B and then the green card application is the way to go, that I can say.
Great, thank you. Eduardo, in terms of kind of cultural sensitivities and maybe English as a second language, how's that impacted your kind of move to the US and how it's been perceived by others?
Thanks. So yes, I English is my second language, as I was lived most of my life in Colombia. It has been a challenge. I probably speak slower than most of New Yorkers here, but it's also a good differentiator. So you need to look at it in a positive way. It's also hard because in my case, I probably can't read that fast, probably can't write that fast. So taking a good contract writing lesson at the LLM course is very important. And if you can, most of the LLM programs also have like legal English programs that can help you just start writing much better. In Colombia, at least, or in civil countries, we write a lot of things. When we are drafting a lawsuit or we're drafting a contract. I think here everything is more straightforward, and you got to learn the ways. If you go to Rome, do as the Romans. So it's tough at first. It's something that you can accomplish, in your year of the LLM, and you can, end up becoming a much better writer, a much better speaker in English, if you take advantage of your program.
Yeah, and I struggle with English as a first language sometimes. So I still put U's into certain words coming from the UK where we have a different type of English perhaps, but fully appreciate that. And I think from a kind of cultural sensitivity point as well, there is this perception, maybe it's fair or unfair, I don't know, but Americans might be more confident and more kind of maybe abrasive, or maybe more just outgoing, extroverted generally. And if you come from a background or you're typically introverted, right? It's a very kind of there's a bit of tension there. So it's something that you have to kind of figure out and work with, and obviously kind of get to your own comfort level. But obviously, English as a second language can certainly impact that type of behavior for sure. Gildy, have you found any kind of cultural sensitivity issues along your journey?
Yeah, English is not my first language as well. Okay, I started learning it like when I was in high school, but it's nothing close to like being an attorney and like practicing law in English. It's a completely different case. And I highly, I recommend, like what Eduardo said, taking advantage of the advanced writing classes. I think all LLMs has that as a mandatory subject to study. I mean, I think most LLMs do, because they need that in order to be successful at the school as well. All the essays and everything writing includes that structure that you need to follow, like the issue spotting and then applying the law and the conclusion and everything. So it could be an hassle, I believe, in the beginning, but at the same time, the more you got exposed to it, the more you write, the more you read, you get better, and you see it's getting better. I was not like a very patient person myself as well. I can't say that I was working in a law firm and doing like a federal litigation, which probably like how intense they are with the subject, like the language they use and like the structure of everything, all the pleadings. Every court has a different rule, and every judge even has a different rule to follow. It was like hectic, but I think it's a great learning experience for me, that it helped me throughout my career. So I highly recommend like writing those motions, like push yourself to kind of like, and I was lucky, I have a great like senior attorney that is responsible for me when I was working in the law firm, that he kind of like helped me a lot about like, basically like redlining my paper before it is going to the in front of the judge. So I can tell, like, just be patient and do like, prioritize progress over perfection. How about that? Because I was a perfectionist myself, and I was, no, this is not looking good. Like, you compare yourself with like the actual native speakers, like pleadings. And I actually did litigation. I went to the court. I went to a federal court to defend the case. And when you see all these guys talking to jury, and they're like so comfortable in the language and the body language and everything, it is very intimidating, and it was very overwhelming. And I remember my first experience, I wasn't even able to talk the first 5 sentences I said doesn't even mean anything like in English. But the judge saw that, and it was like, oh, okay. Like, he kind of like calmed me down. He just like kind of like maneuver and like asked me questions about the stuff that I wrote. He's like, you don't need to summarize. I have some questions. If I appreciate the answer. I mean, they know. And again, like Eduardo said, you're not alone. Like, I saw many non-native speakers in that courtroom, like doing their best and still winning the cases. It's important in a sense, but I think if you know what you're doing, if you know the law, if you did the work, and it's not you're not going to lose the case just because you can't speak proper English. You know what I mean? It's still important for your own confidence. But I think the more you do that, it's not something that you can't like figure it out in the long run. You
Yeah.
need to be persistent and patient with yourself. That's what I can say.
Yeah, 100%. I teach a couple of classes, and I tell my students all the time, you know, just prepare. If you're well prepared on everything, you know, even if English might be a challenge for you, it's not your first language. If you're well prepared and you know your case inside out, then that's the basis for everything else. That's great. So I want to make sure we have time for questions, which I do see in the chat. But thinking about kind of switching gears, I guess, thinking about kind of what to do to improve chances. What are some of the things that you have found? And Eduardo, you mentioned, you know, multiple rejection letters, probably being ghosted by employers, prospective employers, which is very frustrating and can be, you know, just you know, it can really put you back a few steps. What are some of the things that you think can help our audience in terms of, you know, how they might find work in the US?
Me going
Yeah.
first or Eduardo? Eduardo, okay.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Eduardo.
Perfect.
Yeah, so actually, yeah, I was ghosted. I received rejection letters. I was even flown from Chicago to New York, asked to stay for a second round of interviews, and then no one called, no one sent a letter for 6 months when they sent me a reimbursement ticket, which was interesting. So, you know, don't be afraid. These things happen and you'll get to where you need to get. But the first thing is to find the differentiator. It might be that you take certain classes in your LLM year, for example, related to tax, or related to corporate, or related to M&A, that can give you like a first grasp of knowledge of how that subject works in the US, instead of being a generalist in US law, which is usually what happens when you take an LLM. You just get, you know, different classes, and you know, some might be of your liking, some not. Try to make, you know, try to be able to make a parallel from your career in your home country with the classes that you are taking in the LLM. The second, attend all networking events. You will find that the person that might give you a job is the person you're sitting next to in the bus that's taking you to the networking event. And that's real. Like I got this job because I was working in tax matters with a client who had engaged Wilkie at some point in time, and that's how I, you know, in the end, I ended up meeting, you know, some partners here. So, you know, this works, and you know, and the third thing is do your best at all times. Have a good contacts with your teachers. Your teachers can help you find good jobs. You know, treat everyone right. The people who serve you at the law school, everyone, you need to, you know, to strive for being, you know, recognized as a good person, and that, you know, will take you to places you have never imagined. And then the other thing is get a bar membership. That's really important. If you don't, chances are minimal that you can stay in the US, or you can even find an OPT job in this very tight market that we have these days.
Yeah, good stuff.
I completely agree with Eduardo. The stuff that I can add on is it's important. Again, I mean, some LLM students don't even have experience back their home. If you do, definitely leverage that. If you do have some sort of anything that you did after law school before like your LLM, it could be useful, even like when you're on your resume, like prioritize your experience versus the courses you take in LLM, because we all know the legal industry is pretty conservative in the United States, and there are paths that all law, especially law firms, like follow, like on the second year. Most it's like JDs I'm talking about. Like when they're doing the second year, they all know where they're gonna go for the summer internship, and then if they're good, they're gonna go like a full-time job offer at the end of their JDs. They're all like line up like from first year and then the third year. So for us, we don't have that time. We only have like 9 months from start to finish. And we don't have that much like resources that the JDs use especially at the school for like summer, like workshops or like law school job fairs or everything. So we don't have the advantage of those. I think what we have to leverage as foreign trained lawyers is, first, if you know a second language, that's a great asset, which all of them probably know. So definitely leverage your language skills, definitely leverage the experience that you had before, and kind of like support it with the subjects that you can add on during the LLM. Definitely what Eduardo says, like aligns with your experience, get the subjects that you will be interested, but also like align with your previous experience that you can leverage after the graduation. Definitely try to get like good grades and be like top 5, top whatever in your class, because I don't know if they still do at LLMs. We can take the classes that JDs can also take. So they're like specific LLM classes, but also like the ones that they only JDs, or like you can take with JDs and you can compete with JDs. I hate that competition, but that's the reality in United States. So I remember I took this Business Association class from Stephen Bainbridge, which is the corporate genius of United States. In, you know, most authorities kind of like the guy and like kind of like have this thing for him. And I took his class, even if I'm an LLM. And I remember him like looking at me the first day of the class, and I asked a question. He understood from my accent that I'm not a JD, and he's like, "What are you doing in my class? Do you know the passing rates for this class?" I'm like, "I know, that's what I'm here." And I was one of the ones that had the best, like, I mean, highest scores for his class, and I use it when I'm interviewing with the law firms, because in their perception, LLMs are not as good as, or like not taking depth of a knowledge at the law school versus the JDs. So if you can have kind of like a material, like a valuable inputs that they can use during your interviews to show them, no, you're not like lesser of a JD, that I think it could help you out when you're standing out. Because it, like Eduardo mentioned, standing out is the most important thing. When you're kind of like marketing yourself in a very conservative legal industry in the United States. And that is kind of one of my recommendations. And also, I think industry specific, there are certain areas they tend to hire foreign lawyers more than the others, like tax, like Eduardo mentioned. If you're in the tax arena, it's a niche area, and it has a lot of international exposures. And if you specialize in tax, even if you're an LLM, you're stand out. Same thing, I think for tech. I'm working in tech, I'm working in a tech company, and always wanted to do like an in-house after I had my law firm experience for 4 years in the United States. So like tech is also a good industry that we all know they hire internationals all around the world. They don't mind sponsoring you for H-1B. They're okay with the green card process, because it's harder to get it done in a law firm, and you'll see that. Because law firms, law firms has many candidates. Most of them are the JDs. Most of them don't have like any visa issues. So why would they pick you? Like in their mind. I mean, I'm just doing like a, being like a devil's advocate here. And I understand their reasons too. So it's not impossible, but it is hard to get that sponsorship throughout like a law firm. I was lucky, but I know I was the only one that they sponsored, and they never hired a foreign attorney before. So for me, that was the case. But what I'm seeing from my friends and my own experience, it's not the easy way to go. So if you can leverage your experience in one of those areas, that you can land maybe a compliance position, like as a starter, or like an in-house position, like in international, like global companies, I think you would have more chance, especially when you have a visa problem to solve together with your bar, and then the projecting comes after that.
Yeah, Thanks. No, it's great. It's great. Yeah, it's super helpful. Lots of good advice there. I do think getting your foot in the door in some way. So if it's a compliance role, paralegal role, which doesn't feel great if you're admitted as a lawyer, but at least can get you in the door. It can be challenging to make the argument that you're not going to, you know, jump ship and leave at the first associate role that you get, but it is a good way to get your foot in the door for sure.
Exactly. And Heidi also, I also agreed like with Eduardo in terms of networking. Like networking is everything in United States, which is different. Like probably like it was different with Eduardo too. Like in my country, okay, it's important, but it's not that important like as in United States. I think starting from your LLM like classmate, I mean, most of them probably comes from, you know, other countries. They have all their own connections, like use them. Use your like professor like networks, use your like graduate networks, use like legal mentor network like this one. Like in every opportunity, like I'm kind of like shy in that regard. I don't like going into a like networking event, you know, giving my card, like my resume. It doesn't feel like an organic, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't feel like, oh, like I'm looking for a job, like do you consider me? I think it's better if the networking happens like in an organic sense, like not in a networking event, but some other event at your school, and then I don't know, you talk about something you like, one of your hobbies, like something you're interested, maybe something about your culture or like country or like food. It could be around anything. I mean, I think most LLM students kind of shy in that regard to go to like an official networking event, because the main thing is like people look at you and they're like, they have tons of resumes like going around the room. But I think if you can find and use LinkedIn, definitely, like Eduardo said, if you know someone, if you know a company that you want to work with or like a law firm you want to work for, and if you find a guy that your role model, like I want to be in this guy's situation like in 5 years, like reach out and says like, can you talk to me about your daily like schedule? And most of the time, I mean, the worst thing that can happen, they will say no, which is fine. But the ones that they say is like us, like Eduardo and me, like we have no like kind of, we're not benefiting from this, right? But we're only here to help the people because we didn't get that help when you're like struggling through this. And there are many people like us, like in very good positions and big companies and law firms. They're like ready to help, but you need to reach out. So don't be shy in that regard, and don't just like throw your resume to their face, I think, in the first place, but try to connect on a personal level and then use that network, friendship, like whatever mentorship I think you have for the future. That can be, I think
the key
useful.
is, you said it has to be organic, right? It has to feel sincere, and you can't expect a job after meeting somebody for the first time. So it takes a while to grow a relationship. You know, follow up with people for a variety of reasons. Don't just kind of pepper them with, people are busy, but you know, make it easy for them as well. So if you do write to them, say, hey, it was great to meet you at such and such event. You know, I'd love an opportunity to kind of follow up for an informational interview. You know, to kind of the phrase that everyone uses, and then offer them like 4 or 5 time slots, so it makes it easy. Like, don't put it on them to look at their calendar and figure out when to, you know, make it as easy as possible for them to want to get back in touch with you. So highly recommend networking, and you know, industry and bar associations. Massachusetts has a foreign lawyers bar association group, which was very helpful to me when I first moved here. Industry groups, you know, tech groups like Gildy said, are super helpful. Your resume should be like a true US resume, not a CV that might be more familiar to your home country. So not 3-4 pages kind of listing out all of your, you know, kind of academics and work experience, but keep it to 2 pages no matter how experienced you might be. I think that's really critical as well. Have a law school look at it. Have someone that's looked at US movies look at it as well to make sure it kind of feels right. But let's get to some Q&A, because I want to be respectful of our audience. I know people are asking questions. Amy, I don't know if you want to moderate that, or I'm happy to kind of roll through them.
Sure, I'm happy to. And we have a lot of questions and not a lot of time, so bear with us, and I hope everyone will agree that if anybody has a question that doesn't get answered, I put everybody's LinkedIn, Eduardo's email. Feel free to reach out with your questions. We're going to do the best that we can with the time that we have. So, so the first question that came in, for those of us who are not US based, yet licensed, nor have a green card with remote work possible, what is a useful path to getting hired on a remote basis for a US headquartered company? Are you finding, unless you are US, I'm missing this, sorry, unless you are in the US, that it's an uphill battle? I'm trying the argument that you get the same quality, but at a cheaper salary or rate.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I mean, I think since COVID, it's made the argument easier for sure to work remotely, you know, even if you're not here located in the US. I think the question is, you know, it sounds like this individual is licensed, so that's good. Are you actually practicing law as such? You know, being in-house, you know, it's a little bit different, I guess, in terms of practicing law and how you kind of characterize that to some extent. But at the same time, you know, you can certainly be located in a different office and still work for a US company, absolutely. But you've got to kind of make sure you're kind of ticking all the boxes as it relates to the licensing requirements. So I think it's possible. I think you're thinking about it in the right way in terms of, you know, same quality, cheaper salary. It's really figuring out if they have a need. You know, there are other issues that companies take into account, right? Headcount in that specific office, and all kinds of kind of operational considerations that might not come into your thinking as you're trying to apply for roles. So it's certainly possible. It's just finding the right company with the right, you know, locations.
I can add to that as a personal experience. Like, I mean, SAP, I know they hire people all around the world, like in the legal team as well. So there's like two options. You can be in your country and licensed in your country. Let's say you're in Germany and you're a licensed German attorney. They hire you, but you work in your country and practicing German law, basically. So they use you as a local network attorney in that country of region. But then there's another option, which I have like in our team. We have like 2 attorneys in Argentina. They base in Argentina, but they do US work. So they are working for our team, which is like SAP North America. So they work in the legal stuff and the contract stuff, like in US law, but they're located in Argentina. And the reason for that, for SAP, like SAP uses Argentina and Colombia, some other like Latin America countries for like time zone differences, like for the covers that we have. So we can have like 24-hour like coverage for the stuff, especially if you're like backing up and like helping like sales. So it depends on the role. And to my knowledge, I don't think none of our Argentinian lawyer members are not licensed in the United States. They're not US attorneys, but they're licensed in Argentina, but they still work for SAP North America.
Great. What else?
So yeah.
Thanks, Gulda. So I'm going to try and pick broad questions that'll apply to everyone. Again, feel free to reach out with your specific questions. So how much of your prior experiences are transferable to the US market and work environment? For example, reviewing contracts in the home country versus here. What is your advice to foreign lawyers on how best? I know we talked about this some, but are there some specifics that you can give to people who want to market their competencies earned outside of the US?
Eduardo, you want to go ahead with this one?
Yeah, of course. So I think that, you know, knowledge is the only thing that you will have forever. You know, your skills in contract review and drafting might be interesting, might be very good, but I think that, you know, this adds to very little of what a US law firm wants, because maybe you're in a civil law country, contract drafting works just differently. even in common law, contract drafting works differently between jurisdictions. So you'll find language, you'll find, the construction of the agreement working totally different. So, I might be afraid, and I don't know what you think, Darren and Golde, but in the end, law firms are more interested in how you will become a part of the firm and grow with the firm as fast as possible. And then, they're going to try to imprint a lot of their standards into your work, which means that your knowledge might be transferable, but you might not, use it that much because you just need to go with the standard that has governed the firms for 20, 30, 100 years.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Okay,
I was a corporate
ahead,
lawyer
Dan.
myself. Yeah, in the UK. Sorry, just to interrupt to chime in. I was a corporate lawyer back in the UK, so it was a relatively smooth transition moving here and kind of doing very similar work, M&A, commercial contract drafting, etc., etc. So wasn't as steep a ramp up as say, moving to kind of a more, kind of domestic type topic like family law or litigation, whatever it might be, which is more nuanced for every location that you're in.
Does anybody have a suggestion, the best way to find firms that do hire LLMs?
So it's $1 million question, I guess.
Is $1 million question.
I
That
think,
question I should answer. That is,
Yeah.
it is what I always recommend to people. And sorry, I'm about to take the last question, guys. I always give the advice to go through and find the partners who have LLMs from your school, who come from your countries, who maybe don't come from your countries, but you can find some kind of parallel and reach out to them to find out what their path was. There is no magic bullet here. It takes that digging to find out whether firms are open or not. There are some that it is easy to find. They sometimes post that they need foreign associates, but it is few and far between. It is much better for you to find the people at the firms that have similar backgrounds or similar degrees.
Yeah, things like, things like looking at which firms are representing in certain cases. For example, I once had someone that had seen that a firm was representing in, I forget which country it was in, but it was a cross-border litigation, and they applied for a kind of a document review type role to help with litigation. I mean, that's how creative you really have to get and think about, how you can leverage your experience, your background, your expertise for that particular firm. So we wish everyone luck, and we're here to support. People help me along the way. I'm sure Eduardo and Gildy feel the same. So please do reach out.
And Darren, Gould, Eduardo, thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. Again, reach out with more questions. I'm actually going to think about in the future just having a Q&A for this topic, because there is so much. And we wish you all the best of luck in your job searches. And as Darren said, we are all here to support you. There is additional programming coming up for the Legal Mentor Network, including in the spring, there was some talk about getting the resumes right. There will be a resume workshop. I think it's towards the end of February, but keep an eye out for that. And certainly, reach out to whatever resources you can in the interim to get that resume right. And we have a gala coming up. If you are in the New York area, we would love to see you on the evening of October 25th from 6 to 9 at New York Law School. And thank you all for joining us. Darren, Gould, and Eduardo, cannot thank you enough. And everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Amy. It's been great. Thank you, Darren, Gold, and thank you to all.